Hello everyone, welcome back. So we are talking about this book today. So this is The Green Witch, Your Complete Guide to the Natural Magic of Herbs, Flowers, and Essential Oils, Essential Oils and More, by Arin Murphy-Hiscock. So I am not going to be as animated as I normally am. As I mentioned yesterday, I am sick, I feel like crap, so I'm not as emotionally invested in stuff right now. I'm just trying to not feel like crap. In my December TBR video, a few people were like, oh, that book, oh no. And like, honestly, it's not the worst book I've ever read. So this is also not a good book by any means, but as I read through it, the majority of my thoughts the entire time was just meh. Like, just middle of the road. Like, I didn't have extreme emotions one way or the other. It was just non-eventful. The premise of this book is extremely misleading based on the, like, little subtitle thing here. So it says that it's your complete guide to all of this stuff. It is, if you're going to be a little more forgiving towards the author. It's an introduction. She does not give you a complete guide to anything in this book. It is not a complete guide to what green witchery is, even if you want to follow her thing of that there's no specific tradition and there's no specific tenets to it or anything. Even if you keep that in mind, like, this is not a complete of anything. It doesn't go into a complete list of herbs. It doesn't go into a complete list of essential oils. It doesn't go into anything completely. At best, this is a well-rounded introduction, but even then some of the stuff, she still doesn't go into enough detail and also has a lot of misleading information and just downright wrong information and stuff that she should mention and warnings. And at the most, it's just an intro. Every turn in this book, she tells you to go to another book. And there's another review that I had watched on this after I finished it this morning. I will put it down below, but she put it perfectly. And she mentioned that this book constantly is referencing, like, other books. Like, you need to continue your research, do other research. And she's like, why do I need your book then? Because if it's supposed to be a complete guide, why do I need your book to go look at another book? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And so because of that, I was like, yeah, seriously though. Normally I don't look at reviews before I read a book. And so when I went into this book, I didn't really look through the reviews of, like, what is other people focusing on to, like, kind of make, like, a bias as I'm reading it. And so my thing that I kept focusing on was that, why should I get this book over Cunningham's book? Yes, it's old. Cunningham died 29 years ago, so, like, his books are dated, don't get me wrong. But why would I turn to this book over his on my bookshelf? Like, we literally have our complete book of herbs from him upstairs because we use it frequently. And that book, it's old. We still go to it all the time. Is it complete? No. There are certain things that I'll go to that book and I'm like, damn it, he doesn't have that in there. But for the most part, he's got a lot. This has like maybe 20 herbs to give context. I think Cunningham's probably has like a couple hundred. I haven't actually counted, but there's a lot. And so to compare and say this is a complete one, and I don't even think Cunningham's really claims the title of complete. He just tried to get the most as he could, pretty much. And so it's like, if I'm gonna only buy one book on learning about herbs, especially in a magical sense, I'm gonna use Cunningham's. This felt like, instead of wanting to Google it yourself, you just wanted somebody else to Google it for you and, like, present it in, like, a semi-organized way. The biggest feeling I had from this book is that it felt like when you were in high school and you had to write a paper and you wrote it out and then you looked at your word count and it was like maybe 500 to 1,000 words, but your teacher required it to be like 2,000 words. So you fluff it and you repeat stuff and you circle back and you add random stuff that's not really necessary to just beef up your word count and make it bigger than it actually is. And that's what this book felt like. A lot of the information was repeated constantly, and there was even some, like, there was one point that I was like, I feel like I've read this sentence minimum 2 to 3 times by this point, and I was like halfway through the book, And it was just the same things. And it's not necessarily that it's a warning, those are fine to include, but also her warning, she never actually goes any further than just research, which is like, then what's the point of your book? Because if you can't research it for me, why are you including it? Why should I buy your book? Because, like, even just as simple as saying, like, lilies are toxic to cats, so if you have cats in your house, maybe be cautious of that. Or that, hey, this herb typically is going to irritate your skin. Or hey, this one, super duper toxic. It's very poisonous internally and externally, be careful. And then you could even cite where you're getting that information from. At that point, that's what footnotes are for, and she doesn't do that. So honestly, it just felt like this was written kind of from a not quite fully academic type writer, which usually isn't a problem. But if you're gonna constantly just keep referring me to other books and to research myself, why do I need your book? Now granted, I didn't actually buy this book. I got it in one of the Witch's Moon boxes eons ago, but still, it was one of those things where you're like, I would never buy this. On a whole, it's not the worst book. It's not like some of them that I've read where I'm just like cringing and I hate it and I'm arguing with the book constantly. For example, there's a couple things in here that like definitely the author should have known better and kind of shows that they probably didn't research enough. And it's simple as, well, you can just cleanse things in sunlight, like your crystals. Cleanse them in sunlight. There's a number of them that will get sun bleached, like citrine, amethyst, those are really common. Pretty sure fluorite also falls into that category. I'm pretty sure I've heard that you shouldn't leave it in sunlight. And then there's also like logistical things too. For example, you don't want to leave like, especially like your crystal balls and stuff out in sunlight because it can literally catch things on fire. It's a magnifying kind of thingamajig. Like, it's just a thing that you should probably mention so that somebody doesn't like catch something on fire on accident. And then also she tells you to put things in water. And the ironic part is she said to worry about like hematite and salt, which I'd never heard of. And I was like, is that like legitimately a thing? Like, I've never had a problem sticking my hematite stone in a bowl of salt. I've never had an issue with it, ever. And I tried to Google it, but it's kind of hard to find information on that particular thing. And so I was like, huh, that's something to think about. Granted, I usually don't anymore. I don't usually use salt or water or anything like that. I have a citrine dish that I just put my stuff in, or my pentacle that I'll just set stuff on. But that was one of those things where I'm like, I've never heard of that. But when you try and Google it, it gets really complicated because it like pulls in like more of the scientific brain, and I'm like, no, I want the witchcraft side. But whatever. But she tells you to not put it in salt, but she doesn't mention water. And the thing I found when I was trying to Google it was that you should not put hematite in water. It will also rust, which I didn't know stone would rust. So that was interesting. But she also doesn't mention that you shouldn't put a lot of crystals in water. The one that I know is that you shouldn't put selenite in water because it will dissolve. Like, granted, that stone is not really that solid of a stone anyways. Like, it sheds constantly, it breaks really easily, so naturally it would probably come to your mind that it's going to dissolve. And there's some other ones too that will break down really fast in water. No mention of that at all. But she feels the need to include to be careful with salt and putting them on salt. And I'm like, that's like the weirdest of all of those three that you would be concerned about. Like, maybe the one that's gonna dissolve your crystal might be a little higher priority than rusting it, because I feel like you could just sand off the rust, but like, whatever. Overall, this book, it just really, when I read through it, I didn't have any kind of emotion about it at all, really. I was just kind of meh. Like, some points I was like, well, that's kind of an interesting way to put it. Meh. Or like, I don't really agree with it, but whatever. Like, I just towed the middle line of like, I just don't care. Now granted, I'm sick, so I'm not like feeling a lot of excess energy to put into a book, but it wasn't that bad. Like, it wasn't as bad as some of them that we've read this year, where, like, I don't know that I would put it on my banished books list, though I think it might just end up there for being so, like lacking of information really. Because even when she tells you what like the herbs are for example, she doesn't like explain a lot of the why behind it. And like even like the Wheel of the Year, she doesn't give a lot of historical context for it, which is fine. Like it's not a big deal to me, but for aiming it at beginners, which is what this book feels like it's doing, I feel like that should be mentioned. Also, the other reviewer mentioned this, and I kind of was in the same ballpark of like, well, I don't know, am I like trying to be like too woke? But also like it bothers me. And so the author, because of convenience, just put the gender of the reader as female, which granted, as a girl, like it's not the end of the world for me. It works, it's fine, whatever. But then I have my husband who's a witch, and I'm like, that would feel pretty isolating for him, wouldn't it? As I'm currently writing a witchy book, like, it's not that hard to make it either neutral, where you don't really use a pronoun. Now granted, mine is a little more different because you're talking about like specific people, because it's a death book, so like, you gotta use pronouns. It doesn't take more than like an extra 2 seconds, I swear, to type he / she / they. Boom, done. You got all of the pronouns. Is it a little obnoxious to constantly have to write 3 every time you want to use a pronoun? Sure. However, when the person who's reading it comes across their pronoun listed, it's going to make them feel more included. It's a little thing. It doesn't take that much time out of your day, but it makes a difference to the person who's reading it. And again, as someone who's writing right now, like, trying to be more inclusive, you shouldn't just ignore it out of convenience. Especially because this book really didn't have that much to offer. Like, there wasn't anything like revolutionary, there wasn't anything that was like, oh, it's actually a complete guide, it's an introduction. So you could have taken that extra time to either rework your sentences to not need to have any kind of pronouns, or you could have switched it up. Just, you don't even have to list all 3. You could change it up and have it be 1 sentence on 1 page. You're gonna use she. Later in the book, you're gonna use he. Later on, you're gonna use they. That's fine. It's really not that hard to do, to just switch it up if you feel like you have to use pronouns in it. But like, it's a little thing, but I kind of agreed with the other one. It's like, was it really necessary to make it she constantly? It was a little thing, but it was one of those where I'm like, I don't know, maybe that is like a thing. Because I'm like actively trying to not do that in my own book. So I don't know. Maybe it's just becoming more of a conversation. We're trying to be more aware of things nowadays. I mean, this isn't a terribly old book, but it is a few years old, so I don't know. So anyways, this is more of the trendy witchcraft books. Most of the information you could find, actually more information by Googling it than this book, and since she's telling you to go to other sources anyways, I don't know that you need to waste your money on this book. Go to the other sources that she tells you to go to anyways. Overall, I didn't really have strong opinions on this one way or the other. I would not buy it personally, but it's really just an intro book because you can't trust everything she's saying. She doesn't give you enough information really to like go in depth on any of the topics. So it just kind of felt like a waste of money to me, but other people have loved it. I just feel like you didn't get any information really from this book. So for this one, because I knew I had a few people that were wanting my full thoughts on this, I did take some notes, so we do have an extended discussion on my Patreon. So it is, of course, always listed in the description below. Over there, we'll be going over a few of the different quotes. There were actually some things that I did like in this book. Don't think it's all negative. Like I said, I tried to toe the line of middle ground on this one. Yeah, so it'll be over on the Patreon today. Usually it goes up right around the same time this uploads, within like an hour or two, so if you are a patron, keep an eye out for that. And of course, thank you to my patrons. It means the world to me that you are supporting me here on the interwebs. And until tomorrow, thank you so much for watching, and blessed be.